When it comes to calculating GDP, which is the final value of goods and services produced in a country in a given time period, there's different ways to calculate it. In this class, we're going to focus on the expenditure approach, which is to look at the total spending on goods and services and adding all of that up to determine the total value of production in a country in a given year. The way that this spending is split up is sort of arbitrary, but we're going to try to make some sense of it all. So in this video, we're going to look at why it is split up the way it is, how it's split up, and how you could kind of make sense of it. If we think about spending in a country, if we look at all of the money that's being spent in a country, we could clearly see three kind of categories in it. There's spending by consumers, such as myself or anyone else buying goods for personal reasons. There's spending by businesses, which will be known as investment. So in this class, investment refers to spending by businesses, and savings later on will be known as when you have extra money to set aside and buy a financial instrument, that's going to be known as saving. So here, investment is spending by businesses. And then you have the government who also spends money. Those are the three main categories of expenditure that we look at. Those are the three only categories that we look at if Canada were to operate in a closed economy. However, Canada trades with other countries. Therefore, we have exports and imports. So when we look at those components there, exports is added in and imports are removed, are negative. So why can imports be a negative? Does that mean that if we import more, it leads to a drop in our GDP? Well, no. The reason why imports are treated as negative in the equation is because as you import a good, it's going to be either be imported by a consumer to be consumed, imported by a business to be invested, or imported by the government to be a government expenditure. So it's going to fall into one of those three categories, and it will also fall in the import category at the same time. And because there's going to be a negative amount and a positive amount, those two will cancel out and it will have no impact on GDP, which is how it should be. Because if you think about it, if you decide to order a pair of boots from Italy, well, those boots were produced in Italy, will contribute to Italy's GDP, but were not produced in Canada, will not contribute to Canadian GDP. So it doesn't change anything on the Canadian GDP. But if, on the other hand, you were to buy Canadian-made boots, well, you're still spending that money on consumption. That amount is still there, but the negative import part is no longer there. So yes, that boosts Canadian GDP. It makes it bigger because that is now a product that was produced in Canada to be consumed in Canada. So those are the big categories. So you have to just think about it this way. Is it the consumer, investor, or the government that are dealing with this? And then is it a good that is destined for export markets? So the exports category, it doesn't matter whether those goods are going to be consumed by consumers, investors, or the government in the country. They're just treated as exports within the GDP equation. So we add up what we produce in all of those categories to find the total value of goods and services produced in a given year. So we're going to see in a separate video like all of the little elements of each, but it's just good here to think about what is Canada producing as a whole and which of those categories does it fit in. And understanding that when you import, it's seen as a negative, but you're not driving GDP down. You're just driving GDP down if you're not buying something locally to buy an imported good instead, because that good's no longer being produced in Canada. But otherwise, just that single action on its own will not influence GDP. It's going to influence the trade balance, whether we have a trade surplus or trade deficit, but it won't influence GDP. So hopefully this helps you understand why the expenditure approach is split that way. It's just to make things intuitive, and it's going to help us understand when we're going through recessions why certain of those categories dip more. And we'll see that investment is the one that dips the most in times of a recession. So hopefully that clears things up on how this is split up, and I'll catch you on the next one. If you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing or joining my class where I guide you to apply and expand on the information found in these videos to real life examples. Have a good day.